Welcome to Sharing Hope. I'm your host, Jamie George, and our guest today is Mr. Dave Verhaagen. Dave has 20 years of private practice experience. He is a psychologist, a counselor. He's an author. He's authored 8 books. Dave's focus is with 16 to 29-year-old young men and helping those men who are stuck, who've got emotional, behavioral, academic, substance abuse related issues, and helping them learn how to thrive, learning how to excel and become the men they desire to be. Dave also happens to be a good friend. He is a very funny guy and has tremendous insight in the world. Dave, welcome, and thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So how are you coping with this unexpected quarantine, and how has it affected what you do?
Well, 2 questions there. The first, how am I coping? Unexpectedly well. Literally been inside, except for walking the dogs, for like 4 weeks now. So It has been quite but I have a joke that I've shared with my wife and some friends that secretly I've always wanted to be on house arrest so that I could stay inside and write and watch all the TV shows that everybody says you need to watch and get caught up on it. So there's a little bit of that going on.
Maybe a little bit of a fantasy, like, gosh, if I could just be stuck in the house for months at a time.
Right, exactly. So we'll see. I mean, we're 1 month in, we're okay. 2 months, we might have a different conversation, but so far good. As far as the professional part of my life, we've made a pretty seamless transition to teletherapy. So what you and I are doing right now is what I'm doing literally all day long. I'm doing that 7-8 hours a day. And in the past, because I had some managerial responsibilities and some other responsibilities, I was trying to keep my client load per week down to about 24. This week, I had to add up to 33.
Wow.
Next week, it's up to 35.
Wow.
So if anything, the demand has just jacked up by a significant amount. So I'm literally, in any given day, 7-8 hours a day doing back-to-back sessions.
Wow.
So it's been, I'm used to it. It's something I've done for 29 years. It's not something that wears me out, fortunately, but I'm just grateful that we're able to do it this way. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, seriously. It is an interesting time in history that we are, as awful as this has been for so many, the technology has given us an ability to still socially connect.
Right. And that's what we've been doing. In fact, one of the things that my wife Ellen and I have done, and we've probably done this about a dozen times over the past 3 weeks, is we've just thought, like, who are some couples or friends that we would like to have dinner with that we know we're not going to be able to have dinner with for the next few months? And some of them are local, and some of them are, in Denver and in Columbus, Ohio, and in North Carolina. And so we'll just send a text and invite people. And we've probably had a dozen dinners with people over the past, so about 3-4 times a week, we'll have dinner with another couple.
Over a Zoom call?
Over a Zoom call. So they'll be on Zoom and we'll just sit there and we'll show what we're eating.
Oh, that's
all that
amazing.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's fun. Well done. Well done.
It does. I mean, the beauty of that is, we are able to still connect with each other, even though we can't be in person.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. Well, Dave, talk to us a little bit about, because of your expertise, those of us. So if a person's watching who is a young man, or even if it's a middle-aged man who's because they're thrown suddenly into this world of uncertainty that maybe is unfamiliar, because uncertainty and fear is not this is something you deal with really on a daily basis, right?
Every day.
Right. So I'm interested for a young man who's in the throes of this, and I'm also interested in what some guidance for that person, but also what would you say to a mother or a father who's concerned about their son who's living in another part of town, or their kids, and how they're going to make it. How do you guide people when the level of uncertainty is in some way, in our modern experience, unprecedented. How do you guide people through that anxiety and fear?
It's absolutely unprecedented. And so we don't have another thing to look to. Even the pandemic 100 years ago isn't the same as this.
Right.
It's different. I mean, this is affecting culture in different ways.
Hmm.
And so we don't have a template for it. We don't have a guide for it. And as you said, the uncertainty, is this something that's going to go on for another month, another 3 months, another year, year and a half? Like, we don't know.
And I've heard that's been really, really hard for people. They're like, man, if I just knew it was 60 days, as bad as things are, at least I got a mark. So that's really a psychological thing, right? That level of uncertainty.
That's right. Yeah. Uncertainty is one of in fact, I have a lot of guys that struggle with anxiety. And sometimes the thing that they're most anxious about, if it were to come true, for example, if they're anxious about getting sick and then they get sick, they actually cope with the being sick part way better than the possibility and uncertainty and the looming kind of hanging out there that it might. The sense of things not being settled and certain is one of the big pieces of anxiety. And we're living in a world right now where everything's uncertain. When will things be able to be lifted so that the economy can restart? Am I going to get sick? Is my older relative going to get sick? How are we going to manage our personal finances? I mean, it's on all kinds of levels. We're just living in this time where we don't know the answers to those questions. And so our brains react in this way that just kind of get us really jacked up. I'm hearing over and over and over again, people having trouble sleeping, people waking up in the middle of the night, people feeling physical symptoms like being tight in their chest, which, by the way, also for some people who are really anxious, then begins to make them think like, am I getting sick? All those kinds of things. So just from a standpoint of what your brain does, if you think, this is sometimes how I talk about, take your hand and you fold your thumb in like that, and then you fold your hand down like that. If you think about this is your brain. Now, this is not actual size. This would be your dog's actual size. In fact, my dog is here in my lap. This is her. Yes. The reason she's here is my wife's actually on another Zoom call, and she desperately wants to get in the other room, but she's scratching on the door, so she has to sit with me. But that's your brain. Okay, so this part where your thumb is, there's a little part in your brain called your amygdala. It looks like, if you spelled it out, Amy G. Dalla, like someone's name, but it sounds like a Star Wars character, amygdala. So you have your amygdala.
Yes.
Right. And that part of your brain is there for safety. It is there to light up very quickly. And it's not very smart. In fact, it's kind of dumb as a post. It just is a kind of a dumb part of your brain that just reacts. That part lights up. The front part of your brain up here is really necessary to make meaning of that. And so something externally, like you get scared. Somebody tries to pull a prank on you and scares you, or a car swerves towards you, or you get a phone call at 1 a.m. That part is going to immediately light up.
Is that the amygdala?
Your amygdala. It's going to light up.
Kind of primal. Like, is that the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism?
Very primal, yes. Okay. And so, right, it's going to, and your reaction is going to be fight, flight, or freeze.
Okay.
And when it really lights up, you have what's called an amygdala hijack. That's, in some cases, that's what a panic attack is. A panic attack is your amygdala has just hijacked your brain. It got triggered for whatever reason. It might be a reason you don't have any idea about what was behind it. It lights up and immediately hijacks your brain. And your brain does all the things that you need for safety. It makes your pupils dilate. It makes your breathing quicken. It makes your heart rate go up, makes your muscles contract, like that. Well, you think about that. What's happening right now is that part of our brain is in almost a constant state of alert. Right? And so it might not be to the level of panic attack, although for some people it would. But for a lot of people, that part is just, it's constantly humming. And so there's this kind of low grade sense of dread, anxiety.
That word dread, it's funny. I was just thinking about that word. Like, I haven't really heard many people use that word, but that summarizes a lot of that feeling, right?
Yeah, right. Dread. Like what might happen. Like,
Yeah.
am I going to get sick? Is someone I care about going to get sick? Am I going to make it financially? Am I going to be okay? Is my family going to be okay? Are we going to have to flee to the hills? Like, what's going to happen? And so it's a sense of dread that part is primed for. And a lot of times that part of our brains reacts in ways that are very helpful. But when we're in this kind of chronic state, what it does is it just kind of keeps us jacked up, interferes with our ability to concentrate, interferes with our ability to sleep, and it's not especially helpful. And now, if it's helpful in the sense of like reminding you to wash your hands, reminding you to kind of be more planful and all that stuff, awesome. If there's a path that it takes you down. But when it's just this sense of like, it's almost like your brain spinning, trying to solve a math equation that it can't solve because it doesn't have all the variables.
Wow.
It's like somebody says, solve for X, Z plus Y equals X. And you're like, well, I don't know what Z is. I don't know what Y is. I can't solve for X. But your brain is really trying to solve for X. Like it's zzz, and so it doesn't let up. So the fatigue emotionally, mentally, physically really wears on us. So with that, it's just super duper important to do a couple of things that are just good self-care, good practices that help our minds and our bodies be healthy.
Is there a thing that literally physically we can do to kind of cause that amygdala to come back online?
Yes.
Okay.
So one practice that helps is a practice where I will just call it, it's called by different names, but we'll call it 4-7-8 breathing. 4-7-8 breathing. And 4-7-8 breathing is where you take a deep, really full inhale for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then a 7 count hold. And then an 8 count very slow exhale. And then you repeat it. What that's doing is it's sending the message to your brain, to your nervous system, that the coast is clear right now, that we don't have to be all jacked up. But you have to do that kind of with some regularity. If you can add to that, just allowing your brain to focus on that experience of breathing, just returning your focus to that breathing.
Like paying attention to the breath actually coming into the nostrils, like
right.
That level
filling
of just...
Right, filling up your lungs, the rise and fall of your chest. If you can pay attention to that, what that does is it begins to bring your attention down to the moment rather than being in the past or future. So our brains have developed for safety to constantly be reviewing the past, anticipating the future, reviewing the past, anticipating the future. We're always doing that. We're kind of spinning here and spinning there. And that was great when we had to we thinned off predators and like sort of review, last time this happened, so next time I'll do this. But now it's less helpful because a lot of the things that we worry about are not about physical safety, that we need that. And B, a lot of right now is an uncertain time that we can't, being in that heightened state doesn't help us.
And do we naturally go to worst case scenarios? Is that a thing that we just think, oh, this is the worst?
Yes. Yeah, right. Because it's a protective mechanism.
Okay.
Right. Our brains want to go like, well, what bad thing could happen? And so let's be ready for that. But with this, there's so many, like our brain's just doing this constant sort of spinning and flow chart. And, it's if this, then this, what about this? What about this? How about this? And it's just so fatiguing that it robs us of our ability to be in the moment, have joy. And so when we practice something like that, very simple, it kind of brings us into the moment. The way I like to think about it is you think about a bicycle wheel. You have a bicycle wheel, you have a center hub, and then you have spokes that go off of that. If you think about that center hub being the part of your brain that observes and notices and pays attention, well, we could go travel down a variety of those spokes, all those spokes which have a different either sensory connection or memory or tuning into the moment. So like right now I could say, oh, you and I are both wearing these earbuds. You have a blue shirt on. I have a kind of greenish blue shirt on. You've got pictures behind you. You know, like I can pay attention to that or not. I could pay more attention to what you're saying, or I could do a little bit of both. What mindful practices like 4-7-8 breathing do, like when you're bringing your being in that moment, is that they allow you to kind of say, okay, I'm going to decide not to travel down all those other spokes. And I'm going to intentionally just be in this moment, right? I'm just focusing down on this moment right now. And when you do that, the moment, like right now, even though all the stuff that's happening outside is still happening, even though the world is as it is, right now we're okay. Right now we're in this, we're right. It's not a denial of the circumstances. It's just like, let's just do things that are allowing us to be fully present in this moment so that we can then have the life that we want to have rather than be so wrapped around the axle.
Is this the whole where focus goes, energy flows? Like,
yes,
if we could, when we do the breathing, it pulls all those other things that are out, it just pulls all those other things away. And if we do the breathing, the 4-7-8 breathing, I want to say that again. So we breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. How many repetitions? How many cycles of that?
There's no absolute answer, except that I'd say a good rule of thumb is if you could do that for 5 minutes, plus or minus a few minutes, you know, as little as 3, as much as 8. And here's the thing, when you do it, your brain will fight you on it because your brain really wants to say, hey, Jamie, hey, Dave, you need to be paying attention to this other stuff, or think about this, or what about? And so that's our brain trying to help us. It really is trying to help us. And it's going to fight us. And so we're going to find it difficult to stay just focused on those sensations of breathing because our brain is wired for constantly sort of being on alert and thinking about things and anticipating and all that. And so it's just like working out. When you first start working out, and I think you can tell by looking at me, this is something I do all the time.
I know you're shredded. Yes,
right?
yes.
Right. So
I've seen you in the gym. Just
right. Yes, I'm one to talk about this. Right. But when you work out, at first you feel that burn, you feel that resistance, especially at the beginning. You feel sore, but that isn't a sign that you're doing it wrong. That's a sign that you're growing and you're building. And that's the same thing when you do this kind of practice. Initially, you're going to find the experience to be resistant. Your brain is it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel like this is boring, or I need, and so that's not a sign that you're doing it wrong or that it's not the way to go. It's a sign more that you are, you're wearing a new groove in your head.
Yeah. Right. Like there literally is neural pathways, right? Like you're literally building a new neural pathway.
That's right. So that kind of practice is good. The other thing that I'd add to that is there's a concept in psychology that's called acceptance. It's what it sounds like. And acceptance is a practice of thinking that has to do with accepting things as they are when you can't control them. I mean, there's a lot to this concept, but the one relevant idea is when you can't control a circumstance, you're either going to get wrapped around the axle and very caught up and spun around by it, or you're going to get your head around the fact that this is how it is. So the world is not as it should be right now. It's not as we want it to be. It's not fair. It's not right. There are people that are suffering because of it physically and financially. This is not the way the world should be. It's not as it should be. And yet it is the way the world is. And so when we fail to accept, then we just get caught up in that. And again, our mind is so intent on trying to solve something it cannot solve, something that it is powerless to do something about. Now, there are things we can do things. I mean, we can wash our hands. We can connect with other people. We can do things that are helpful to. But the big picture, and even the small picture, much of that is something that's well beyond our control.
So is that when philosophers talk about isness? Like it just is,
Yes.
So the word I heard you use was acceptance. There's just a radical acceptance of what is.
That's it. Right. It is a radical acceptance of what is rather than what should be.
Okay.
We again, this is part of how our brains are wired. Our brains desire justice. Our brains desire things to be fair, things to be a certain way. And that's great. I mean, that in many ways, it points us to something bigger, right?
Yeah,
It points us to,
it helps us develop vision and
right.
hope for the future and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And a connection with God, and a connection with, dialing in on a spiritual level in a way that's really important. That stuff is good, but there are many circumstances that are fundamentally not the way they should be, and unjust and unfair. And so our brain wants very much for that to be different, right? Some of that's out of fear, some of that's out of a sense of justice, some of that's out of a sense of loss and sadness. But whatever's driving it, you can get either really wrapped around the axle with that and spun up and caught in that, or you can truly, genuinely, authentically, deeply accept it. And then it frees you up then to say, given that, how do I want to live?
Would another word for acceptance be to use some of that spiritual language you were referencing, kind of a trust? Like, I'm going to trust that someone bigger than me has this in his control. I mean, is that another form of that kind of acceptance?
It is an aspect of it, for sure.
Okay.
Right. It is an aspect of, okay, I can't control this. And so I'm going to relinquish my desire for control, and I'm going to trust that this is right. And that's not just wishful thinking. That's, that's coming from a grounded place.
Yeah.
Right. And what I found, and I've already found this in the past month, is that we're talking about me working with young men. The guys that are able to get to a place of genuine acceptance, I've lost my job, or I've, I can't go out and I'm very extroverted and I need to connect with people, or I don't know what's going to happen. When they really get to that place, they do much better emotionally, psychologically, mentally, even physically, probably, although I'm not as much on that one, than people that have a fundamental failure to accept. And so that's one of the things that, as hard as it is, it doesn't sound like a good answer, but it's the true answer. It's like, well, we're either going to practice in a very deliberate, active way acceptance, or we're not.
And can you explain this? Because, I do a lot of coaching as well. And one of the things I've discovered when I'm with a client who gets there, chooses that acceptance, is, almost without exception, something dramatically shifts in their lives. And somehow the things they long for, desired, or whatever else, somehow begin showing up. What's the universal law? Like, what's the thing that's happening that somehow when you finally let go of trying to control it or worry about it or be in fear of it, something shifts, it seems.
Right. I think I have an answer to that. Although, again, it's a big question. But I'll tell you a real quick story.
Yeah.
And this is just, it's a very small story compared to what we're dealing with now. But years ago, I got a little condition in my feet called plantar fasciitis, which is often something that athletes get. And Dave,
that was probably from your time in the gym.
Right, exactly. All that working out. But it is where the tendon on the arch of your foot becomes inflamed. And so people that stand on their feet a lot, people that run, people that often will get it, there's not a lot you can do about it. You can do these little orthotic socks that pull your feet back. You can do little rolls. But for the most part, it's going to run its course in 6 to 12 months. It's just the way it is.
Wow. Okay.
And the bad part of it is that your foot naturally curls when you sleep. And when you step on the ground in the morning, the first thing you feel is probably a 7 on a 10 scale of pain. Not excruciating fall down on the ground, but like a very unpleasant experience.
Wow.
And so for me, that was the worst part of it, is like, that's how I started my day. Step on the ground, pretty persistent pain. And then it's like, so you get very upset, focused, angry, research a lot of it, try to figure it out, try to kind of get, and so I started after a few weeks of that, like, what would I tell somebody? I mean, I'm a little slow. Like, it takes me a couple of weeks to apply what I would tell somebody else.
Oh, good. I'm not alone. Yes.
Right, exactly. What would I tell somebody who came to see me about this? And I said, well, I would tell them to practice genuinely accepting that that pain's part of their life right now.
Hmm.
And so I did. And I don't want to make this sound like a magic trick, but after about 4 or 5 days, the pain went into the background. I just noticed that I was, and physiologically, I don't think there was any change in the pain, but in my perception of it, it dramatically reduced.
Mm.
And that's one of the principles of acceptance is once we kind of acknowledge that there's pain in the world, that there's difficulties in the world, and there are pieces of that that we can't change, our mental focus doesn't get so laser beam focused on it and so hot. And so it's just sort of like it's there, it's accepted, and it gives room for it. So where I'm going with this to answer your question, kind of the corollary of this is, I feel like it's kind of like a slippery bar of soap, right? It's like if you were washing your dog in the big tub and you had a soap bar and you were trying, if it dropped and you were just constantly sort of striving after it, grabbing it really hard.
Yeah, yeah.
That thing is, the harder you strive after that thing, the further away from you it shoots. The harder you grab it. And so it's whether that's with pain of I must make this pain go away, or if it's with kind of something aspirational or something that you want, the more there is a kind of an insistence on it and a focus on it, a demandingness on it, the more it will tend to elude you. And the more there's kind of like a gentle cradling of it. Like you can still have a desire. I mean, as long as you're not overly attached to the outcome of it, it's like you can still be tuned into your desires and what you want. Then there's something that happens psychologically, probably spiritually as well, that allows that thing to be more accessible to you.
Wow.
And so it's a powerful thing. I see it all the time too. I mean, you do coaching and in my therapy, it's like when guys move away from it must be this,
yeah.
or I must, whether it's a relationship or
yeah.
it's a thing, once they kind of like accept whatever is and move into their life in a more full way because they're not so tied up in that thing, it gives them much more bandwidth to just be, and then the thing tends to come to them.
That soap illustration is so good because that's it, right? I mean, it's when you hold on to it, I mean, that thing's just going to squeeze right out of your hand.
Right. And paradoxically, the more you grab it, the further it goes from you.
Yes.
And that's what we say, like with the research studies on acceptance, and there is a research base to it. It's not just some nice idea. What the research says is that if someone makes it their goal to stop feeling pain, then their pain will not decrease. In fact, sometimes it'll even increase. But if their goal is just to genuinely accept what is, then paradoxically, the pain decreases. Just like it was with my feet. It's like once I kind of went from the research and focus and angry and all that kind of stuff, and just was like, this is part of my life right now. Then it was like it just kind of went into the background. So it didn't physiologically change probably, but it certainly did. My subjective experience was way better. And then I'm much more freed up. I have much more mental and emotional bandwidth to kind of go where I go.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. That I think that's so relevant for all of us right now. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's just an absolute practice we can put into place immediately. As you're talking, I'm thinking about what are the different places I need to apply that right now. So our time is basically up. But I mean, that was so good. I mean, so thank you. I do want to ask you this as we go. So when the band lifts, what's the first thing you want to do, or where's the first place you want to go eat?
Peter's Sushi. So there's just outside of Nashville, there is a great sushi restaurant that I'm not a big sushi guy, but I'm a big Thai. It's Thai and sushi. And so I think that's top of the list. There definitely is a pizza place or two I want to hit. There's a couple of taco places. So yeah, that actually the two things that keep running through my mind are what restaurants and what concerts. I'm a big
Oh,
concert guy,
that's right. Yes,
I'm
you
all
are.
right. So I really want to. I, I almost want to book a concert now, even though it's hard to do, for just to be hopeful. Just to kind of
Yeah,
look ahead. So
yes, that's amazing. I love it. Well, thanks for spending the time with us, Dave, and what a gift. Thanks for guiding us through that process, man. Be safe and say hi to Ellen for me.
thank you, Jamie.
Okay,
Take
take
care. Bye
care.
bye.
Thanks.